Welcome to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well, broadcasting on KSQD Santa Cruz on 90.7 FM and live streaming over the web at ksqd.org. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist. On today's show, we'll be discussing psychiatric service animals, which are most commonly dogs, for a person with a psychiatric impairment, something like post-traumatic stress disorder or severe anxiety. These dogs are individually trained in obedience, performing tasks, and working in distracting public environments to mitigate their handler's psychiatric disability. Unlike emotional support animals, their function is not just to provide support, but rather to perform tasks which enable their handler to function in ordinary ways that the non-disabled person might take for granted. We will also try to clarify some of the confusion between the roles and training that distinguish psychiatric support dogs from emotional support animals. Today I'm joined by two guests who are going to help us learn more about these highly trained animals. Lori Katz is a CPDT-KA, that stands for Certified Professional Dog Trainer, Knowledge Assessed, and is the owner and trainer of Kindred Spirit Dog Training. She's coached owners with family dogs, therapy dogs, and psychiatric service dogs for almost 2 decades. Lori received most of her training at the Marin Humane Society under the direction of Trish King and has attended many conferences and seminars to extend her knowledge base. She uses state-of-the-art science-based methods which are fun, humane, and effective. Lori's most recent endeavors have included training her dog in the sport of agility and nose work. Most importantly, they are training together to be a team, which can help recover missing dogs and in time cats as well. Lori and her dog Chopa, who is here with us today right under the table, have also assisted the kids in critter camp at the Santa Cruz Animal Shelter. Lori finds working with psychiatric service dog teams in training especially rewarding. You can also find Lori right here on KSQD. Her call-in radio show is called Cats on Dogs, Insights for Both Ends of the Leash. Also with me today is Rita, who would like me not to share her last name in order to preserve her children's privacy. Rita was born and raised in Switzerland, where she married before immigrating to the States and living in California for a while before moving to Colorado. In 2000, her daughter was born, followed by her son several years later. Both of her kids were diagnosed early in their lives with sensory processing problems, and later other symptoms that emerged included mood and executive function challenges. Her family tried to move back to Switzerland, but the cultural transition proved to be too much for her children, so she came back to the United States with the kids to see them through their school years. Rita's current profession is as a seamstress, and she's the proud owner of 2 psychiatric service animals, Chibaki and Kokapoo, and with the help of a program called Domino Service Dogs in Denver, Rita's also now helping to train her son's service dog, an Old English sheepdog named Momo, who is also here with us today, right under the table. Rita struggled with symptoms of major depression since she was a teenager, though her condition is currently well managed with medication and her service dog. I want to welcome you both.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so glad you can be here too. You know, getting ready for the show, I looked up a little bit of information about service dogs, and I found out that there are just more and more sort of psychiatric service dogs coming into service. Right now, the figure that I've read was about 4,000 service dogs placed in the United States, and that's according to accredited and unaccredited placement services. Lori, you were thinking that there was many more. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, there are both good and not so terrific training agencies, some of which are very opportunistic, may charge $30,000, $50,000 for a dog that doesn't necessarily meet the criteria for behaviors out in public access, let alone coming to the promise that they've trained these dogs for psychiatric tasks. I recently had to help advocate for someone who had bought a dog through an agency, and it wasn't even house trained, and it was so stressed being out in public that clearly this was not a good match.
But you're thinking that there's probably more than 4,000. You're thinking
I would think maybe 4 or 5 times that.
Wow.
In that there are many, many people who are either rescuing a puppy or an adult, or purchasing one from a breeder and then getting the training from a skilled trainer, with a skilled trainer, or doing it on their own.
Like you do, because you're not one of those agencies, for instance.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, I understand.
And some of the things I do that I don't charge for that I think are so important is to help coach with the matchmaking phase. So I'll have feelers out to different folks I know that work at shelters, or maybe there's a wonderful dog that's owned by a breeder and they're being retired from breeding, but gosh, they're terrific dogs, to help make that match and help the person with an assessment, so that they're not spending all this time, all this money, and all this heart in a dog that maybe doesn't have the right stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll come back around later about if people want to find a dog for this purpose, how they might go about that. I just was wondering about the frequency of it, because it sounds like if there's that many, there's a good chance even people who don't have a dog are going to encounter a psychiatric service dog at some point. So, can you help define what that is so people know? What is a psychiatric service dog?
So a psychiatric service dog is a dog that has a good foundation of behaviors and no bite history, that kind of thing, who's been trained to do specific tasks that mitigate the symptoms of the disability. And in that way can make the world much larger, whether it's helping someone who's having night terrors wake up at that point, or providing a medical alert to different symptoms.
Like, for instance, what kinds of when you say
so if someone is in the process of experiencing a panic attack, those symptoms might be a higher respiration rate, diaphoresis, sweating, that kind of thing. If the dog knows, oh, when my owner does that, I need to lay down across their feet and not move, then that pressure, for instance, might then lower the heart rate a little bit, lower the respirations, and circumvent a full-blown panic attack.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting, because I know, like, my sister, for instance, has a therapy dog that goes in, and she works in a senior center, and they've done some things about measuring, people's their heart rates and their I think mostly their heart rates, and they've seen that it goes down when people are petting the dog. So it's interesting you talk about that, but this is a dog who would be trained to be alert to that and would respond to it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So the owner wouldn't necessarily have to seek them out, right? They might sort of be attending to the owner.
Right.
Oh.
And that's actually in having a dog that's willing to offer attention to the owner when it might be a little unpleasant. Like, gosh, my partner's not doing well, I'm going to choose to be with that person who needs help with their psychiatric symptoms. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes things like sleep dysregulation can be very difficult, and might be easier if that dog is laying alongside you, or has certain other things to do, or makes waking up easier.
Fantastic. That makes a lot of sense. What kinds of specialized training do psychiatric service dogs have?
I think what's important is developing those skills, those tasks, and that's a little bit different. And using some regular dog training techniques to do that. For instance, the dog very often needs to learn to target their nose to something. So you tell the dog, touch, and they're going to put their nose to a target you present, or maybe it's your open hand. Similarly, for them to be able to target with their paw. To paw at your knee is a very often used response that the owner will give a very subtle cue, like a really subtle cue, like maybe even winking at the dog or moving one finger. The dog will start pawing at their leg, and so that for all the world that looks like, oh, I need to go let my dog out to relieve itself. But maybe what's really going on is the person needed a break, was feeling some symptoms of being overwhelmed in a situation, whether socially or intellectually or just sensorily, and then the dog gives them that out.
Yeah.
But again, it's a not difficult task to train, but it is important to proof it so the dog doesn't then just offer pawing at your leg whenever it wants to go out.
Yeah, how do you do that? I see you have some tools here with you today. How do you go about doing that?
We do have the chicken tool, we have the kibble tool, and the Charlie Berg tool.
Do you want to tell our listeners what you're talking about?
We're talking about calories. I often joke that for a service dog, you want a dog that is part of the No Calorie Left Behind program, not the No Child Left Behind. Yeah. And by having a variety of treats, we might equate this in money as one treat might be worth a nickel, and the chicken is probably worth a couple bucks.
So you have a bunch of treats there that you're using?
So you want a dog that has what we might refer to as a food drive, or just a work ethic. A dog that wants to be with the owner, but also engage in these tasks. That these are no different than you might train tricks or jumping through a hoop or anything like that. So keeping it like, what a terrific dog, giving them a lot of acknowledgement, cues, which could also be heard as commands, but it's very different to cue a dog saying, I'm requesting this, not like you better do this or I'm going to cause you pain.
Yeah.
As old school training might have been. Even guide dogs for the blind transition to using exclusively positive methods.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you meant by humane when you...
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and then do you want to talk about the kind... Like, you've talked a little bit, but if you could expand a little bit more on the kinds of jobs that psychiatric service dogs do for their owners. You talked about helping them, remove them from a situation.
Right.
Maybe giving some pressure, to them.
Right. Also intervening with self-harm behaviors. That's not something that's difficult to teach. So again, we talk about the cue. The cue is the symptom. The symptom might be scratching or cutting. And the dog then is trained, I can interrupt that by getting between, if it's on an arm, getting between, the fingernails in the arm, or if there's a knife present, to knock that knife out of their hands. Yeah.
Wow. And also, I know when we were talking before we even started recording, you were talking before we even were meeting for this, you were talking about alarms. Could you go into that a little bit about dogs that help people just with daily regulation? And because I know I have a lot of clients that have trouble waking up to their alarms, for instance.
So, you can, again, pair a behavior and a reward, instead of it being, the symptom might be lack of wakefulness, but the cue is going to be the alarm itself on their phone or on their alarm, and that for the dog that means, I need to go get my breakfast, which is in a Ziploc underneath the pillow in the bed, so that becomes very rewarding. And then one thing that's interesting about dogs is that they're very specific, often in the same way that people that are autistic might be. So the dog would know to wake you up to that particular sound in that particular bed, and need to learn to generalize to the living room if you were taking a nap on the couch, to a hotel room. So they need many areas before they can generalize a given iteration. Yeah.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. So, we hear a lot about on the news, and, we read about and see that people are trying to bring their animals into all different situations. And we hear a lot about emotional support animals, and I'm wondering if you could just make the distinction between what a psychiatric service dog is and an emotional support animal.
So an emotional support animal can be, I believe, still any number of animals. For it to travel on a plane, it's much narrower than it used to be, because I think there were some kind of silly things. But the emotional support animal has access to transportation and to housing, and needs to be basically well-behaved, whereas the service dog is a medical device, obviously a very sentient and fabulous one, but they need to have both the right temperament and the right actions, and it needs to be a genuine disability that affects many areas of life, and that the task must mitigate some of the symptoms of the disability Where an ESA is an animal companion.
ESA being emotional support animal.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I was recently working with one up on the UCSC campus, and I had never seen them up there before. And just in the course of the hour I was there at one of the colleges, I met 3 other pairs. And so you won't see an ESA, or an ESA shouldn't be wearing a vest that says service dog. It does not have the same rights. It does not require that the owner, have a significant disability, just a symptom.
And
that
it's
it
not
helps
as
with.
highly trained to be able to go into all kinds of different environments in the way a service dog would
Right.
be. Okay.
Right.
Okay. You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM, KSQD Santa Cruz, K-Squid, many voices, one station. And this is State of Mind, being human and living well. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, and I'm here talking with guests Rita and Lori Katz, and we're discussing the training that goes into and the tasks performed by psychiatric service animals and how they differ from emotional support animals. Rita is sharing her personal experiences of both using and training these service dogs. This show was made possible by Family Service Agency of the Central Coast.
KSQD thanks Family Service Agency of the Central Coast for supporting this program. Family Service Agency provides counseling and support for people of all ages facing life crises and challenges. You can reach them at 423-9444 to see if they can help you. Thank you, Family Service Agency of the Central Coast, for supporting KSQD 90.7 FM.
Back to our interview. So Rita, first off, I want to thank you for coming in and being willing to share about your story. I understand you've been a dog owner for a while. You've had several dogs, but today you were willing to tell us about, how you came to want and start to need a psychiatric service dog.
Right. When I came to the States, first of all, I've been struggling with major depression since before puberty. I would say it started about 12, maybe 10 to 12 years old. And I came to the States, and I was utterly alone. I didn't have a social netting. My husband, of course, he worked. I did not. And so with work comes a social network. Without work, there's nothing. And I got really depressed. I sank into depression. And I had a dog, or I adopted a dog, that without this dog, I might not be alive today. And this dog did not make it. I mean, I didn't make it. I didn't know about psychiatric service dogs at that point yet, and the dog would, as I would judge, not be suitable. It was like a stigmatized dog breed. The dog was very shy and needed a lot of socialization, which I provided, which provided me with a task, and caring for another being, very needy being in the beginning. I had to kind of earn her trust. And then we had to explore the world together and get her comfortable in various situations. She wasn't even able to walk along, a road with me in the beginning. She would just freak out if a car was coming.
Wow, so you had a very big purpose in terms of...
I did a ton of training, which saved me.
Mm-hmm.
The service dog I have currently is a later dog. He's a later dog. I had him later, and he had a completely different personality. It's a little cockapoo. I already had him before, training him to service dog. Once I got it, and I inquired earlier about this before I had that dog even, but the psychiatrist was not open to it, which threw me back and discouraged me quite a bit. So it took another 7 years until I made my next effort.
Why do you think the psychiatrist was not supportive of
It was my stupidity. I didn't know the psychiatrist well enough, but I didn't, I think an important part with major depression, at least, is to acknowledge it yourself. I was not at the point. The depression, the condition itself, discourages you from seeking help. And you don't think or at least that was the case for me, I didn't deserve that. It wasn't really that serious. Well, I couldn't get up for months, but who cares? I mean, it's not that serious. I'm just lazy, right? I can't do my fundamental task. I struggle to just get through the day.
That's what the depression tells you, you're saying.
But
yeah.
I'm just lazy, right? So I don't deserve any help, really. So that makes it very difficult to get help. And once you're there and you ask for it and you get blown off, guess what?
Yeah, you
get just proved in that you don't deserve it.
Do you think the psychiatrist didn't know about service dogs or
did,
understand?
But he did not know me. And I mean, I think I would say it's the wrong approach to go to a psychiatrist and tell them first thing you want a service dog.
Okay.
And of course, they want to establish a relationship,
right?
Which I would second. Yeah. Absolutely. But I was not at the point in my journey where I would get that. I got it afterwards, but it took me a few years to get there, too.
So I think if I hear you, you're saying it was an important step for you to sort of accept and acknowledge that you had a mental health condition that was actually pretty disabling for you.
Yeah.
And then the dog was the next step to that, in that first that acceptance was important.
Right. And the dog then opened up my life. I was very homesick for a lot of years, and there were like 3.5 to 4 years I didn't go back because I would not separate myself from my dog.
So you didn't see your family or go back?
I did not. Like my wider family, me and my husband were here, and but I was very homesick for my other family. I'm the youngest of 5 children.
Oh, wow.
And things happened in Switzerland, tragic things with my family where I was not part of because I couldn't really go there. I mean, I could but couldn't. My disability kind of prevented me from going, really.
It was too big a hurdle for you.
Yes, and when I was there, I was always worried. I was always anxious, and I was not who I could have been. So I wasn't really there. Yeah.
And how did that change when you started training your dog?
First of all, again, I had a purpose training this dog for the expectations and then for the tasks. So it was a lot of work to train. And once I was there with the task, also, it opened up the world for me. I would finally travel, and I would go and do the things. I would go hike places that I couldn't before. I would go, be social that I didn't before. That's
so
quite a step. And now, like last spring, I've actually even been able to get a job. So which is culminating.
Because you weren't able to do that before?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then part of that was about being around other people or in public spaces or what?
I had quite some social anxiety, that too, that I don't really have anymore.
Confidence, is that part of it?
Confidence, yeah. Self-confidence that I didn't have back then.
Just so your dog goes with you to work?
My dog goes with me to work, yeah. And I have to say, just with his exemplary behavior, that the people that hired me, they were cautious, but they still hired me, which I'm very grateful that they gave me the chance. Once they got to know him, they adore him. He's now our, sewing room dog.
Yeah, he's the sewing room dog. The mascot.
He's our mascot. Yeah, they love him because he's really just, you wouldn't even know that there's dogs or that there's a dog in the store. Even if somebody comes in with a dog into the store, they will not know that there is a dog in there already.
Would you be willing, I mean, you talked some about it, but it sounds like having this dog and training your dog as a psychiatric support dog has really changed your life.
It does.
Yeah. Over what period of time are you talking about? When did you start training your dog?
Trying to remember. I think it was a 2-year period.
Yeah, I think that's 2. And if I could hop in for just a quick moment.
Yeah.
You know, there's some things you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, well, it's a psychiatric service dog task. Maybe it's just more like a party trick. But things like Rita told me about her training him to find keys, to find the phone, all of that just helps with activities of daily living.
And that's actually pretty endearing, cute, but also very, very helpful. What I trained my dog to do is finding my iPhone. With my iPhone, I have everything at my fingertips. I know where to go, when to go, what time to leave. I can make my notes, what I need to bring, what I need to think about. Has fundamentally changed my life.
Right.
It really
as long as you have
has.
it in your hand.
As long as I have it here. But if there's something and, I can't find it, so I can send him and it brings it to me.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's quite neat.
Yeah.
Or then another task of his is when I'm in the car and I'm just kind of, not focused, which easily happens, when you're like anxiety or just the thoughts that kind of just, you can't shut them off and you can't really, you're here, but you're not really. The dog can interrupt that. Or the deep pressure, It seems like, yes, it is cuddly and everything.
Go back to the deep pressure.
Deep pressure
what
therapy.
Is that?
My dog, I trained him to lay on my chest. And it is like, yes, it is cuddly. Most people think it's just a nice, cuddly, whatever, cozy feeling. And yes, that helps, but there's more to it. It seems like pressure points or whatever are activated, and it feels like when I'm anxious, I can't speak and I can't suddenly breathe. Mm-hmm. That is huge.
Mm-hmm. So when he's pressured, it's a lot like a pressured blanket that some people might use, I think, right?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Except the blanket licks you and just, it's
yeah, if there's an on and off switch for so many of these things, like if someone's, having a night terror, pressure on the feet might be fine, but pressure on the chest might be agitating. Mm-hmm. So it really is so specific to what helps the person's symptoms come down to a more manageable level.
And you're actually able to train the dog to know the difference?
Yeah, like Momo will lay her head on the shoulder of my son. Mm-hmm. We still have to work on what he exactly needs. She can lay her head on the lap, on the shoulder, and she can just lean on him. There's various ways. My dog is pretty little. His weight is perfect. Mm-hmm. Just as I can be on the sofa and he hops on here and I can start breathing again.
Gosh, it sounds like they're amazingly responsive to what you might need at the time, and that part of it is about that relationship between you and the dog. It's not just
right.
So they learn to read you. You learn to cue them about what you need. You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD K-Squid Community Radio for the Monterey Bay. And this is State of Mind, being human and living well. We're also live streaming over the web at ksqd.org. Now you can tune in to KSQD anytime through your home smart speaker by saying, play K-Squid on TuneIn. You can also listen, download, or subscribe to State of Mind shows on Apple Podcasts and Google Play Music. In case you're just joining us, I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, and I'm here talking with guests Rita and Lori Katz about the training that goes into and the tasks performed by psychiatric service animals and how they differ from emotional support animals. Lori helps us understand more about these highly trained animals and about the important roles these dogs can play in the lives of their handlers. Back to our interview. So let me just back up and orient people that might be just tuning in. So now you're going to talk about the dog that's with us today, Momo.
So we switched from my own personal service dog to the puppy I'm training.
That you're training now for your son.
For and with my son.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So this dog, my son might feel uncomfortable or does something in social situations. And since he's just a kid, sometimes it's really hard for him to tell people to please, I need a break. And he will not do it. And so the dog will create distance between him and other people when it's getting too much for him. And that's one task. The other one is if he needs a break, we still, since we're in the process, we still have to determine whether he wants to give the dog a cue, which can be scratching behind the ear, it can be just getting a little, nervous, it can be anything. It can be blinking the eyes, it can be anything really. Or whether we want the dog to sense that herself and just lead him away. Or she can whine, or she can do something that he gets the excuse she needs to go potty. Or the other one, again, if she just leads him away, then it's obvious. Then another task is to interrupt when he gets in a stress situation that he cannot control, and it kind of happens fast. To interrupt when, for example, the breathing gets heavier or she sees him getting agitated, that she interrupts. And she's a pretty shaggy dog on purpose. He can really hold on to her. She does not mind at all to be hugged by him, and she will calm him down right then when he would dive into a situation that would not be good for him.
Like a meltdown kind of situation.
Yes.
So
and
she regulates
very
him.
embarrassing for him too. Which they will then, if it's such embarrassing situations, this will just cut at his self-confidence.
Right, and also make him not want to go back to those
Exactly.
situations.
So it will be the opposite. And
Lori, she just talked about some of those tasks. Do you have any commentary about your experience training dogs for people that might need them? Anything that Rita said that sort of sparked?
Well, I had an experience yesterday seeing Rita and Rita's son and Momo on the beach, and it to me, it is hard to be a young person and be really positive all the time when your dog is doing things that at times, are can bring up potentially feelings of anger or frustration or embarrassment, with the dog. And this was Momo's first experience at the beach, and she was free at times, and then she was on a leash at times, and my dog was on leash and off leash, and there was a difficult situation, and what I saw was just so beautiful in that her son had both a physical and an emotional challenge with this long leash and this fluffy dog. And Rita was able to comfort him and get him back on task. And Momo, too, was, in surround smell of the beach, and her mind was blown. She was not into being a working dog at that point. She had checked out of her working tasks. But to see that both the son and Momo were able to reset to a place of emotional regulation and move forward relatively quickly. Whereas I would have thought, that would have been so difficult for both the young dog and, the young handler owner, or even the mom trying to figure out how to make it right. So for me, it was just, it was really exciting to see great parenting, great dog stewardship, and also just a fundamentally good dog.
And so do you think that happened because they were helping each other? Is that what your sort of implication is?
I think a little bit of it is temperament, but then also, yes, the fact that they had put in so many hours as partners and so much experience of sometimes being overwhelmed, one of them or the other, and then, and then being able to access the supports that were available. whether it was Rita or, her son getting his cool again. And, it just could have been so different. And to see that her son has such empathy, that to be able to come back to that foundation of empathy was very, very exciting for me.
And also it sounds like one of those situations that builds confidence, like you were saying,
Because then they moved on.
Yeah.
It could have been like, the beach was a disaster. But no, it's like, well, the beach had a challenge.
Yeah.
Next time, maybe we'll set it up this way or that way.
Yeah.
So
it reminds me of something you said before you came in today, that when we were talking ahead of time about what made your dog a good dog to be a service dog, and I wondered if you wanted to share a little bit about that. You were talking about that ability to re-regulate really quickly.
Yeah, so and that also for my other dog was one of the things that make him a good dog. It's like the good bounce back. That there might something happening, and she's also very confident.
She meaning you're pointing at Momo right now.
Yeah, even more so
Not
than
me.
my own. No, she's a very confident dog, and that means, and she has a good bounce back, so she's not easily scared. She's not easily worried. If she's worried, it's like, okay, goes by, and she resets pretty much right away. And
can you talk about from your experience how that works as an owner? Like, how does that help you when your dog's able to reset quickly? Or you have an example of that you'd want to share?
When they cut metal, for example.
Yeah.
Did I share
Wasn't that
before?
Yeah.
So we were walking, and I have to say, this was in Switzerland. So my dog had flown from his home, from Colorado, that he knows, 10 hours to a completely different continent, completely different environment. So we were all walking. That's also very different there. It's just with dynamics and everything, with everybody walking, public transport and everything. Here, most people use the car. So we're walking there and crowded, street, and right when we passed a place, we were not entirely past. There was somebody cutting metal, like it was remodeling something, right behind us. And we both jumped. I mean, this is loud. This is scary. We both jumped. With a different dog, the different dog would have been scared and wanted to, escape, and would have taken a while. So my dog looked back there after jumping, saw what it was, and that was it. We both just kept walking quietly.
And so that ability to bounce back helps the owner too?
You don't find
every
with
day.
all dogs.
Yeah.
Actually, there's less dogs that have that than not.
Yeah. So that's
and
special.
Stuff like that. Or like with Momo, even when we brought her home as a puppy, our neighbors had a dog that was about a year old, and he's just a teenager. And I try to prevent it, but no, of course it happens. And our whole little backyard is towards their yard. And Momo goes out, and the dog comes running and barks at her ferociously. Well, Momo was really scared because her mom only barked when there was something going on, and when she wanted to separate the pups or something. There was no barking going on any other time. But so that little puppy was scared and ran back in the house. That would have been it for many puppies and for many dog encounters later. Well, she took not much time, and her little nose was poking back out the door. And then she came back out and checked out the situations, and she saw that everybody's fine. And then it took 2 or 3 days, and the dog was barking, and she was just like, whatever. Having, that takes quite some sound dog temperament to do that.
So I'm definitely hearing it takes picking the right kind of dog.
It does.
Yeah, in addition to the important training.
Yeah, in fact, we were waiting for 1.5 years. I was really doing research to find the right breeder. The right breed, the right breeder, and the right dog.
So let's talk about that. Where does somebody, you're talking about finding the right breeder. So Lori, where would somebody go if they were interested in getting a psychiatric support dog or looking into that, where would they go to find out more about that?
So for a psychiatric service dog, getting the help of someone that really knows about dog behavior and dog temperament to help you assess, because even if you're going with a puppy, puppy temperament testing is far from foolproof. So sometimes it might be better to find a young adult dog that still has potentially a long amount of service to be had, but you don't necessarily know who a dog is going to be. But there are often at many shelters, there are good behavior and training people who can help see if they have some dogs that might have the right temperament. I would beware of breeders that tell you any one of their dogs can be used as service or therapy dogs. Even programs that breed their own dogs, it's a 1 in 10 or a 2 in 7 for like guide dogs for the blind, or
meaning that just 2 out of maybe 7 dogs that they're trying to train are going to be appropriate.
There's a wonderful little movie that just came out called Pick of the Litter, which follows a litter, and so it in some ways the psychiatric service dog tasks are a little easier than some of the guide dog tasks, but it really depends on the person. So finding someone skilled, if anyone in the Santa Cruz area is looking at a dog and wants some help in terms of matchmaking to see if that dog might be good as a service dog in training, I'm happy to do that for free. There's also an agency down in San Diego.
Hang on, let me just back up. So
Sure.
Can we put your name and number on the website for the resource
Sure.
list? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. You were saying there's
a service dog agency called Little Angel Service Dogs in San Diego, and they, both for kids and adults, can provide an already trained dog for autism assistance and seizure alert and psychiatric needs, and I believe diabetic alert as well. And if you're accepted in their program, you put down a $500 deposit, and then at the time at which the dog is ready, you and a support person need to pay for your own travel to San Diego and spend 2 weeks there, and then your $500 deposit is refunded. They
during
say
the 2 weeks there, you're training.
You're being trained, right, to be the handler.
Oh, I see.
And for a lot of folks, it might be worth the wait. It's a long wait. It's a shorter wait if you donate a lot. I think they need to raise $30,000 per dog.
So that's the cost that goes into training that dog?
Right, right. And then they have puppy raisers, and they have a campus facility. And they also, though, do teach some courses in how to select a service dog, how to train your own service dog. And then the founder, Katie Gonzalez, wrote a book called Training Your Own Psychiatric Service Dog, which is available on Amazon.
Okay, and that we'll have on our resource list too?
We will.
Great, good.
We will.
Okay, that's really good to know. And can you talk a little bit about, like, if somebody has a psychiatric service dog, what kind of rights and privileges come with that,
Right. So, unfortunately, there are some people that don't truly have a disability for which these tasks mitigate symptoms. So part of my work I see with my clients is to help advocate. So they cannot be asked, what is your diagnosis? They could be asked, does your dog provide tasks that help mitigate the symptoms of your disability? Or the dog may not be what might be a traditional looking service dog, like maybe it's not a lab or a German Shepherd. So as
which
long
is
as
what
the dog,
people are more used to seeing, like
Yeah.
with guide dogs and
Right,
things like that.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that dog has access everywhere that the owner has, with some small exceptions, and there even there's a company that produces a little business card size card that has the direct quote of the Americans with Disabilities Act that relate to service animals. Yeah, so if unless your dog is misbehaving, they cannot be excused from from any setting.
From any public setting?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM, KSQD, K-Squid, many voices, one station. And this is State of Mind, being human and living well. We're also live streaming over the web at ksqd.org. Now you can catch any of your favorite programs here on K-Squid through your home smart speaker just by saying, play KSQD on TuneIn. If you're just tuning in, I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, and I'm here talking with guests Rita and Lori Katz about the roles psychiatric service dogs perform for their owners and how they differ from emotional support animals. Both of my guests share from their personal experiences with these dogs and share information about how you could seek this training for your animal. A word from our underwriter.
KSQD thanks Atlas Assistance Dogs for supporting State of Mind. Atlas Assistance Dogs expands access to service dogs for people with disabilities through customized training support for individuals and dog trainers. More information at atlasdog.org or email info@atlasdog.org. Thank you, Atlas Assistance Dogs, for supporting community radio, K-Squid 90.7 FM.
Back to our interview. I'm joined today by Rita and Lori Katz and two canine friends, and we're talking about psychiatric service animals today. So you were just talking about the rights and privileges of Lori, you were just talking about rights and privileges that dogs that are certified as psychiatric service dogs have. And I'm just wondering, Rita, have you run into any issues or problems as you move through the world having a dog that's specifically a psychiatric service animal?
In Colorado, where I live, there's no certification or available. I wish there would be a tag like that, because unfortunately, encounter people who post their pet dogs as service dogs, and this is a huge problem.
Because they're not well trained, you mean?
They're not well trained. In fact, my little cockapoo got attacked on an airplane by a fake service dog. So my dog had settled under the seat, as he normally does. Usually, he settles under the seat. We do pre-boarding. He settles under the seat, and then you don't hear anything of him. People, even next to me, unless they see him, they don't know that I have a dog. So he was settled, and suddenly there's this huge dog aggressively charging to a seat, trying to pull my little dog from underneath the seat. Of course, he got freaked. And so that's very unfortunate. There wasn't even a person with that dog. So all I could do was grab the dog by its loose skin behind the head, and things were restored. But it's very unfortunate. And it also just really raises the stigma of service dogs in an unfortunate way.
So you want to strongly discourage people from trying?
Yes, I really do. It's luckily we were fine to move on. It was unpleasant. It messed up my whole vacation in Switzerland because my dog did not move on right away. I had to do a lot of training to get him reset. Other dogs might not. Disabled people might lose their dogs that way. They're service dogs.
That all this training goes into.
I know of people it took them 2 years to get their dogs back on task after being attacked. So anyway, but this was veering off. In Switzerland, where I go to, they're a little bit behind us. Psychiatric service dogs are not recognized. It's really only seeing eye dogs and mobility dogs, but their population is a lot more tolerant towards dogs. Dogs are a lot more recognized as members of the family, so I can have my dog with me in most places, public traffic, transport, restaurants, most offices and stuff. They're not allowed in grocery stores, but I can live with that. And so it, in fact, it was even in a class where you learn how to ride like open chairlifts with your dog back there. So it was pretty cool.
Wow.
And so it also gave me an opportunity to socialize her really well, which is harder here.
So if somebody, I'm just recognizing our time, and I'm thinking, if someone were wanting to get started in this process, could you just lay out clearly what would be some first steps, Lori, that somebody would take if they wanted to look into getting a
Sure.
psychiatric service dog?
Yeah, the first is to see if you do have a mental health professional that's willing to help support the process or to educate themselves right along with you, because it's it's not a small undertaking, and so the human family needs to be on board, and welcoming of having an animal that's going to take a lot of resources, time and money and affection, and so then seeing what are the symptoms of your disability, how might those be addressed by a service dog, and then how do we find a dog with the right stuff? And that may vary. Someone might live in an apartment and need a smaller dog, or is in a work or school setting that's going to favor one kind of temperament over another, not just learning, but where is the dog going to be working out in the world? And then trying to find a dog that can meet some of the requirements, get a dog training professional to help you assess that animal and give you a roadmap, and be of good enough cheer that you can understand that it's not always a linear process, that things change in a dog's maturation and emotional sense. There might be some pitfalls that you have to do an emotional detox on a dog, to help them along, or even just having that there's that possibility this dog may either need to be rehomed or it needs to become an ESA, an emotional support animal, as opposed to a service dog, or
if they're not able to do the tasks anymore.
Yeah, well, or yes, it's being an emotional support everywhere, but really it's only set up for working out of the home, and that can still be a great benefit. And unfortunately, sometimes these dogs in training need either a change of career or to be rehomed, and to get the right support, or when it's time for a dog to retire, that's granted to the dog. Yeah.
Okay. So to help people, I think you were put together some resources that would help them figure out, or at least find out, what some steps they can take, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those will be listed on our...
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. And I did have a thought, and I just wondered, since as humans we tend to outlive our animals, I'm just wondering how that is when an animal is so fundamental in someone's everyday functioning. Like you were saying, sometimes it's better not to get a puppy, but then they have a limited lifespan. So I'm just wondering what experience you've had with that when people have an animal that is so fundamental to their functioning,
right,
because we tend to outlive our animals.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes, depending on the dog, if your service dog is retired, it may or may not be receptive to a young or new dog, but hopefully it is if the dog's properly socialized. And then, but I wouldn't wait till your dog is 12 to start finding that puppy or new dog to come in. So sorry about that. I thought you heard that.
That's okay.
How do we take care of these service dogs whose owners are deceased?
Well, it shows me what your orientation is and where your heart is. No, I was thinking, I have clients who come in who are so devastated by the loss of their dog, or, by their dog getting older, or the anticipated.
I think grief support is also...
Yeah. Rita, you have something to add?
Yeah, I have to add to that. My service dog is 12. So I am looking at retiring him as soon as she's trained. So she came into his life and he loves her. It's so sweet to see. And so he'll just have his golden years. He'll be retired in 2 years, and we'll have a new puppy come in. So for me, it helps that there's another dog there. It doesn't take away from the morning. I've lost a few dogs, and it always hurts down to the bone. But then the hole is not just as deep, and she can also help train the young dog.
And help you through that grief, I would imagine. So that overlap sounds like it might be really important.
And I think as profound as losing a pet dog is, losing a service dog, the stakes are, I think, much, much higher.
Yeah, I would guess that.
Yeah.
Because it's performing this essential function.
Your world has become bigger thanks to this dog, and then you don't necessarily receive the most helpful consolation from people if they don't really understand what losing that dog could be, or
the enormity of it, right? Mm-hmm. And the dog is the very one that would be helping you through something like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that seems really important for people to know. Some people are afraid of it getting animals even for that very reason sometimes.
Well, I'm trying to remember, like at Little Angels, there's an age limit of it's either 60 or 65. They won't place a dog with a person that's potentially not going to outlive their dog. If
you were going to leave our listeners with something a final point maybe that you didn't get to make, or something that you think is just really important that they, be aware of or think about on this topic of having psychiatric service dogs, is there anything you'd want to say?
It's just immeasurable what they give us, and please, if you don't have one, be respectful of people who have one.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I would invite parents to err on the side of, hey, this is something we should maybe think of, rather than, when our child is such and such an age. Because, we don't want youth to have to suffer with difficult symptoms if they don't have to.
And you've really seen it make a difference for kids of all ages.
Yeah, and subsequently to really benefit the whole family system.
I just want to thank you both so much for coming in.
You're very welcome.
I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, and I want to say thank you again to my guests, Rita and Lori Katz, and thanks to you for joining us here on State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. To hear more conversations about mental health and wellness here on California's Central Coast, join me on the first Sunday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. right here at K-Squid 90.7 FM. This is Community Radio, and we want to hear our listeners' stories and questions. In all our shows, we seek to educate by featuring personal stories of mental health recovery and wellness, and the sharing of resources. So give us a call or email us if you have a topic idea or you have an experience you think would be of interest. Or if you have questions you'd like us to ask our guests. You may just become part of one of our future shows. Call us at 831-824-4324. Say your name and leave a 1 to 3 minute message. Or you can email us at debra.stateofmind@ksqd.org. These are some of the upcoming show topics you might want to comment on. The mental health effects of Lyme disease, eating disorders, and grandparents raising their grandchildren. I want to say a special thanks to my co-producer, Lauren Fine, and to our new audio editor, Jeannie Balzakowski, and to Jennifer Young, who's joined to assist with research and outreach. And finally, thanks to acoustic guitarist Adrian Legg for composing, performing, and donating the use of our theme music. This is listener-supported community radio, so that means we want and need to hear from you. Let us know what you think about this or any of the shows you're hearing here on KSQD. Just send us an email at ONAIR, that's on air, at ksqd.org, or call 831-900-5773. This is KSQD, Santa Cruz. Just remember, 90.7 FM, K-Squid, your ink spot on the dial. Stay with us.